Hello everyone, this is Eagle News. I am Jeff Sanidad in Washington. It's Saturday, February 10, 2024. Here in the nation's capital, the week's recap begins with the United Nations sounding the alarm that the world is entering an age of chaos. It adds that the Security Council today is deeply divided, unable to address critical issues such as the Israel-Hamas war. Shan Kadusale has the details.
United Nations Security Council.
Secretary General Antonio Guterres warns that the world is entering an age of chaos, a dangerous and unpredictable free-for-all with total impunity. He also calls for changes to the Security Council and international financial system.
United Nations Security Council, the primary platform for questions of global peace, is deadlocked by geopolitical fissures. This is not the first time the Council has been divided, but it is the worst. Today's dysfunction is deeper and more dangerous.
The UN chief's remarks come amid devastating conflicts in Ukraine, Sudan, and Middle East and elsewhere, with millions of people displaced by the fighting and in need of assistance. Guterres encourages world leaders to seize the opportunity of the Summit of the Future this September in New York on the sidelines of the annual General Assembly. This, he says, to shape multilateralism for years to come. Shen Kadusale, Eagle News, we live in extraordinary times.
A crisis expert warns that the risk of major miscalculation looms over the Middle East. This after nearly 4 months of war in Gaza between Israel and Hamas. Danica Lee has more.
International Crisis Group President Comfort Ero says the big three, Iran, Israel, and the US, do not want to see escalation.
But we are also seeing that every day we're one step closer to a major miscalculation. Averting that kind of catastrophe again becomes really important.
Ero says emerging talks of a 40-day truce are the foundation, getting that 40 days and then building up on that.
But there are key things that need to happen in those 40 days, including the hostages and the sheer magnitude and the horror that face the families.
She mentioned things that need attention and response: fuel, water, livelihood issues, and basic humanitarian needs.
The sheer catastrophe that faces Gaza, what is immediately necessary to deal with the humanitarian catastrophe that we see in Gaza.
Comfort asks to not confuse secession and renewal on the side of Palestine with the humanitarian crisis happening in Gaza.
You have to think about the succession, the governance, the leadership around the Palestinian Authority. But I don't think we should confuse that in terms of what is immediately necessary to deal with the humanitarian catastrophe, which is why we've been very clear at Crisis Group that the only way to assure that is through a sort of an immediate ceasefire.
Danica Lee, Eagle News, we live in extraordinary times.
Meanwhile, a jury finds a Michigan mother guilty of manslaughter over a school mass shooting carried out by her teenage son. Joanne Soriano tells us more.
Find the defendant guilty of involuntary manslaughter.
In an unprecedented and closely watched case, 45-year-old Jennifer Crumbley and her 47-year-old husband James are the first parents of a school shooter to face felony manslaughter charges in the United States for the actions of their child. Crumbley was convicted of all 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter. A jury in Pontiac, Michigan deliberated for about a day and a half. Crumbley will be sentenced on April 9th and could face up to 15 years in prison. Her husband is to be tried separately in March. Their 17-year-old son, Ethan Crumbley, is serving a life sentence for the November 30th, 2021 shooting at Oxford High School. 4 students were killed in that incident. The Crumbleys bought their son the 9mm Sig Sauer handgun. He used this to carry out the attack. The Crumbleys were accused of ignoring warnings that their child had mental health struggles. Prosecutor Karen McDonald told the jury that Jennifer Crumbley failed to exercise ordinary care when the smallest, tragically simple thing could have prevented it. Joanne Soriano, New York, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
let's head over to Canada, where the country's most populous city, Toronto, is gearing up for the upcoming FIFA World Cup 26. This huge sporting event is anticipated to bring a major boost to the city's economy and tourism. Isla has that story.
FIFA World Cup 26 is coming to Toronto and is poised to bring significant economic and cultural benefits to the city. 16 cities across Canada, United States, and Mexico have been chosen to host the tournament, embodying the theme "The World in a City," an image that Toronto is known for, its love for the sport and its multicultural identity. The first match will kick off June 12, 2026 with Canada's men's national team. In the past, Canada has only held other FIFA-related events. In 2015, Canada hosted the FIFA Women's World Cup. FIFA World Cup 26 is predicted to create about 3,500 jobs, welcome 300,000 visitors, and $393 million in GDP for the city of Toronto. The province of Ontario is set to earn $456 million in GDP, and Canada to earn $1.2 billion from the Toronto and Vancouver Games. FIFA World Cup 26 is considered to be the largest edition of World Cup to date, with 3 host countries, 16 host cities, 48 teams, and 104 matches, making it the most inclusive FIFA World Cup in history so far. Ashley Sackmar, Toronto, Ontario, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
Extraordinary stories from Thomas Eyewitness today, from a village in France dealing with the impact of an abandoned mine to a community also in France not very happy with the ongoing ban on fishing, to a jungle in Indonesia where some endangered lorises have been released back to their natural home. All these on this week's Correspondent at Large.
And now news and commentary from around the globe. Some scary times for people living in the eastern French village of Rosbrook. They're dealing with the after effects of an abandoned mine. The ground these houses have been built on is unstable because of unfilled mine shafts abandoned long ago. Cracks appear on the walls and foundations of these homes. Strings hold doors to prevent them from slamming. And residents are left with property that is virtually worthless. I mean, who would want to buy it? The problem goes back to 1985 when the backfilling of mines stopped. Legal battles continue as residents try to get compensation. Still in France, a lot of unhappy fishermen in the Bay of Biscay. For the next month, their boats will have to remain docked. The government has imposed a temporary month-long ban on almost all commercial fishing in this bay to protect dolphins. It follows calls by environmental activists to protect the marine mammals, pointing to a surge in dolphin deaths on the Atlantic coast. Scientists estimate that around 9,000 dolphins die each year off the French coast as a result of accidental capture. The ban applies to boats longer than 8 meters, and about 450 French vessels are affected. Fishermen and industry groups are upset, saying the compensation payments promised by the authorities are insufficient. And to the Indonesian jungle now, where conservationists released 7 critically endangered lorises back to their natural habitat. These animals had been seized from private individuals. The critters spent several days undergoing rehabilitation to make sure they could survive back in the wild. Handlers say the animals are healthy and have normal behavior. Lorises are small primates that live in trees and bushes. Their status is critically endangered, and their population is declining because of a loss of habitat, poaching, and the illegal trade for pets. Conservationists say these animals are just one step away from extinction. And before I go, I want to take a moment to wish my mother-in-law, Lourdes Saul, a very happy birthday this weekend. Nanay, we look forward to celebrating with you. And I'll be back in a couple of weeks because we're in the Philippines now. But until then, I wish you all peace, joy, and happiness. Thomas I. Likeness, Correspondent at Large, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
Prime Minister Anthony Albanese asked Papua New Guinea's James Marape to speak before the National Parliament of Australia. Iko Hortaleza Quinola reports on Oceania At A Glance.
Prime Minister James Marape is the first Papua New Guinean and South Pacific leader to address the Australian Federal Assembly. Marape expresses gratitude to Australia for the past and present profound work that the country has contributed to the development of Papua New Guinea pre- and post-independence. In his speech, Marape touches on the emerging role of Papua New Guinea as a co-development player in the Pacific.
It's really more to do with thanking Australia for who they have been to us. It's not always about asking. As I said, point of reference with me and the Prime Minister Albanese and ministers in our ministerial dialogue would be about trade, commerce, people-to-people relationship.
He envisions Papua New Guinea as an economically resilient and self-sustaining country, with Australia's support gradually moving away from aid, grants, and loans.
Australia still maintains its pole placing as our key trading partner and our place of doing business and our transactions. People transitioned also, people visiting, people studying, Papua New Guineans studying, Papua New Guineans employed overseas. Just like Australia too, PNG is the biggest point of investment for them.
Iko Hortaleza Quinola, Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea. Eagle News, we live in extraordinary times.
The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention opens its doors in Japan. The newly opened regional location is the first of two scheduled to be established outside the United States this year. Rosel Feria has that story on Health is Wealth.
The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention celebrates the opening of the new CDC East Asia and Pacific, or EAP, regional office in Tokyo, Japan. CDC says its EAP regional office aims to further strengthen the U.S. government's global health impact by working with Japan, partner countries, and regional organizations. This to prevent, detect, and respond to health threats. Through the regional office, CDC says it will focus on identification, response, and mitigation of health threats in international settings. This to rapidly respond to outbreaks at their source and prevent spread to and within the U.S. CDC says partnering to train a global workforce and sharing scientific expertise will strengthen programs and people to prevent emerging threats. Michelle McConnell has been named the new CDC EAP Regional Director. She will transition from being Director for Asia and Pacific in the Office of the Global Affairs at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Later this year, CDC's Central America Caribbean office in Panama will open as well. Rosel Feria, Washington, D.C. Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
February is American Heart Month, and as the American Heart Association celebrates its 100th anniversary, TikTok creators across the nation encourage millions to learn CPR. Jane Kathleen Gregorio has that story.
In celebration of 100 years of life-saving efforts, the American Heart Association teamed up with 17 content creators nationwide for a TikTok live event on February 1st to kick off American Heart Month. As part of the Nation of Lifesavers movement, their mission aims that by 2030 to double the survival for the 350,000 people that suffer cardiac arrest outside hospitals yearly. 90% of these cases result in death, often due to lack of prompt intervention or CPR. If administered promptly, this life-saving technique can significantly increase a person's chances of survival. Hosted by medical expert and influencer Mikhail Varshavsky, also known as Dr. Mike, the 1-hour live stream reached over 125 million followers across various platforms, encouraging everyone, even kids as young as 9 years old, to learn CPR. Content creators engaged in hands-only CPR, competing in an interactive gamification in order to measure accuracy by using advanced mannequins. The event crowned Scott D. Henry as hands-only CPR champion for demonstrating the most accurate compressions at the recommended pace of 100 to 120 beats per minute. Damar Hamlin, who plays for the Buffalo Bills, is a national ambassador for the Nation of Lifesavers movement and helped kick off the event.
It's American Heart Month. As the national ambassador for Nation of Lifesavers, I'm joining the American Heart Association on its 100th birthday to encourage you to learn CPR, because together we can save lives.
Nancy Brown, CEO of the American Heart Association, stated that TikTok Live and influential content creators play a vital role in preparing communities to respond to cardiac emergencies, and she emphasized the importance of involving the next generation in becoming heroes and joining the Nation of Lifesavers. For more access to CPR classes and how-to videos, visit heart.org/nation. In Corpus Christi, Texas, I'm Jane Kathleen Gregorio, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
Staying a step ahead of weather interruptions, NASCAR moves its season opening clash and battle at the LA Coliseum a day early. Organizers are avoiding the potential dangers that a race day storm can bring. In Los Angeles, California, Alan Basilaje with race results and reactions of drivers.
NASCAR's season opening event boasts not one, but two checkered flags. One which waved for the third annual clash at the LA Coliseum, followed by, and for the first time in California, a NASCAR Mexico Series race titled La Batalla en el Coliseo, or Battle at the Coliseum. Drivers for the clash were relatively behaved for most of the first half of the 150-lap contest around a quarter-mile track, until a cluster of cautions were issued in laps 71, 76, and twice in lap 78. At around 32 laps left in the race, number 54 Ty Gibbs took the lead over Joey Logano and was able to hold it until a spin-out caution occurred with 10 laps left to go. This opened the door for number 11 Denny Hamlin to leapfrog from third position to first on restart. Amazingly, a final caution flag waved with only 1 lap left to go, and in dramatic NASCAR fashion, Hamlin fought off the pack to win the clash. Alan Basilaje, Net 25, compare your thoughts after lap 10 restart versus lap 1 restart.
It was fortunate for me to be in the situation I was, and would I be able to get around the 54 had he not had the issue right there in the first? No way, right? But I was able to capitalize on that opportunity when it happened. So the restarts are tough, especially at this track where you have high braking. You know, the second and third place car don't care about your agenda, and they're just going to run through you and force you up off the bottom, and that's how most of the passes get made here.
For the battle at the Coliseum race, many favored Daniel Suarez to win, and on his part, Suarez didn't fail expectations, taking the checkered flag at this history-making race. In his press conference, Suarez made reference to the incoming storm and applauded NASCAR for their decision to move up race day.
We know that there's going to be a huge storm starting tonight, pretty much for the next few days. So if we were not making this move, who knows where we're going to be racing, and who knows if we were going to race. So huge credit to NASCAR and to the broadcast partners, and of course to the fans that they show up last minute.
The other big headline was the rain, or rather, how NASCAR avoided it by running both races a day early ahead of the storm. This done for the safety of the fans. So while attendance was unavoidably less, for folks who showed up, it was like having their own private NASCAR race, and who wouldn't want a treat like that? Alan Basilaje, Los Angeles, California, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
And as always, before we let you go, here's our photo of the week. that this image of sunrise over the Mujeres Island in Mexico usher us all into the weekend. Thank you, Rose Papa Angeles, for this photo. Thank you all for joining us again. If there are stories or topics you want us to share with you, just comment below. Follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and X at Eagle News Live. I am Jeff Sanidad. We live in extraordinary times. Stay happy and healthy, everyone. Enjoy the Super Bowl.